What's up, Wargamers? Welcome back to World of Wargaming. I am Isaiah, and today I invite you once again to pull up a chair, grab a tasty beverage, a snack, and let me talk at you for a minute. And today, I want to talk at you about this little book right here. This is Dread Knights, the newest offering in the Forbidden Psalm family of games. Now, I am going to upfront say that I had a key misunderstanding about this game that is going to affect the content that I make for this game. This understanding has absolutely nothing to do with like the rules or anything else. So the blurb for the game release said that mentioned something about at the turn of the century, and it was referring to like 1800 to 1900 because the game is set in the Victorian era. However, when my brain read that statement, it understood it as going from like the 1900s to the 2000s. So my brain was immediately filled with images of things kind of like World of Darkness and Buffy and Angel and all of these other TV shows and properties and IPs that were going around at the time. And then that's what I said. And don't get me wrong, Victorian era is awesome and is a great setting for this, but just full disclosure, when I get to playing this, I will be skinning it to a modern theme. Now, I'm not going to change any rules or anything else. I'm just going to have modern terrain and modern characters, and they're going to have the associated weapons. So their weapon loadouts will most likely remain very simple, and I'm okay with that. Just want to let you guys know about that up front. Art-wise, the game sticks to its roots, delivering really awesome, pretty dark types of artwork. We have a lot of pages like this that are just kind of cool maps of the imaginary world that we'll envision, or the imaginary city that we'll envision for the game. Which again is kind of an imagined Victorian London, I want to say, that part of the world. And then there's some that are almost like, photography, which this is kind of, I haven't seen the kind of photography looking images in his rule books too much. It's normally just really, really, really cool art. As with the other games in the Forbidden Psalm family, it's played on a 2x2. It uses a D20 with a difficult rating of 12 for most of your rolls, so target number 12 for most of your rolls. Measure anything, anytime you please, and all of your modifiers stack. Then we come into the standard pages of the intros of his books for converting crews from other games. So if you want to convert a crew from Forbidden Psalm or from Kill Sample Process, or I assume maybe even from The Last War, you could do that into this game. Then we come into our creating a crew step, our hunters, as they are called. Now again, I'm not going to do this, as you guys know, I'm not going to go through this part of the book here. When we're ready to put the game on the table, we'll do a separate video, short 5-10 minute video, just walking through the steps. But I assume it's very, very much like previous games. There are a few things in this section, however, that I'm going to touch on because they're new to the game. New to the game, obviously it's a new game, but new to his books. And that's, one of these is occupation. So when you make your guys, you roll a D50, so a D100 and then half. And they get an occupation like Prowler or Brewer or Surgeon or Academic. And then they get a little bonus to their character. It gives them a little bit more backstory. So it's kind of taking the background aspect and then actually applying a rules mechanic bonus to it, which is very cool. And another thing that I want to mention in this section is that there are guilds. Now, I know for a fact this is not in Forbidden Psalm, and I know for a fact this is not in Kill Sample Process. I do not have a copy of The Last War currently. It's just I haven't gotten to that game yet. I do have, at the very least, I have a team, because I have some Krieg models that I could use for it, but I just haven't gotten to that game in that book yet. So to my knowledge, this is a new thing, and it's when you're creating your crew, you choose either the street folk, the faithless, the merchants, or the fallen. And it's like a gang, it's a group, it's a faction. It gives you a little bonus, you get a little base you get to do stuff with, and you can progress through them. And I think that's a neat addition to the game. I love little kind of things like that that give you a little action on the table, but also help to develop that headcanon and that narrative and get that good immersive glow going for when you play your games. Love aspects like that are added into games. Then come to the merchants, which is, you know, what you can buy and sell. And this is why I think that a lot of what I have will be okay and work just fine, because there are things in here like revolvers, Lancaster pistols, lever action rifles, shotguns, needle guns. Like, there are not super modern weapons, but weapons that are modern enough that they can easily be reskinned to something else. And I'm here for that, because again, I just have this, like, I already bought the models. You know, I bought the Sam and Dean Grimchester models from Blacksite Studios to play this game with, because I just have it hooked in my head to play this game and these stories in a modern setting, and I'm so excited. I actually bought a lot more than just the Sam and Dean Grimchesters, but that's maybe a conversation for, you know, another video. We then come to something that I appreciate wholeheartedly as a gamer and as someone who plays a lot of games, and that is a set, easy to find glossary of all the terms and things that you're going to encounter in the game. I don't know why some games don't include this or just make it hard to find for whatever reason, but I always appreciate it when there's a clear-cut glossary. Like in the other games, we have some spells, magical things that we can do. In this game, they come in the form of manuscripts. So you have your day manuscripts and you have your night manuscripts. Any model can read a manuscript, and there's a section later in here on spellcasting, I'm certain. But you cannot use a manuscript if you are wearing armor with an armor value greater than 2. So 1 is okay, 2 is okay, 3 is unacceptable. Correct, but it was much sooner than I had thought. The directions for reading a manuscript are on the very, very next page. They are a presence test, DR12. On a failure or critical, you take a tragedy. The spellcasting does not consume the manuscript. You can read the same manuscript multiple times in a scenario. Tragedies carry between games, and they are spent when you roll on the calamity table. So all the things actually happen when you roll on the calamity table. If you ever fumble when reading, you immediately roll on the calamity table and add your incurred tragedies to your rolls. Maximum 12-inch range for spells, and calamities last the duration of the scenario unless otherwise stated. We then move into the how to hunt section. This is something that I want to talk about for a second. It has absolutely nothing to do with the game. This is just me. It is something that I am torn between every time I read these books. And that is these pages that are brightly colored. I like them from an aesthetic point of view. I like them thrown into the book here and there. You know, there's something about it when you're just flipping the page and the pages go from white to black to red. It's just, I don't know how to explain it. I can't really put it into words, but I do enjoy that. However, the part of me that plays a million different games and wants to highlight all of the important information in the book is bugged by it, because when you have those darker colored pages, especially these where it's red background with black lettering, it makes it very, very difficult, nigh impossible to highlight things. Now, there are some things that are kind of naturally highlighted for you, kind of keywords that are highlighted for you, and I know that is strategic, and I appreciate that on those pages, because it does help you to find the parts of the page that you are looking for. So, it's not really a complaint, it's just something in my brain while I'm talking about this that I want to expound upon. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Let's continue. So when you're setting up, you are picking your scenario, setting up your scenario, determine round 1 weather and conditions, deploy, and then roll initiative. Initiative is a D20 high roll. Making tests in the game, as I mentioned earlier, is a difficulty rating of 12 on a D20. Pretty standard for his games. 1 is a fumble. 20 is a critical. Luckily, you do have the 6 things. I'm not sure what they're called in this game yet, but they're omens and glitches and things in the other games. Your rerolls and stuff like that. So you do have a chance to, you know, cancel a fumble / also re-roll it. So he gives you, and I love it when games give you that natural wiggle room. It's just nice to have. Your movement is your agility plus or minus, or 5 plus or minus your agility. So if your agility is -2, then your movement is 3. If your agility is +4, then your movement is 9. You can move over things that are an inch tall for free. Anything taller than that, however, you have to climb at half your movement speed. You can jump gaps up to 3 inches, but you must pass an agility test of, you guessed it, difficulty rating 12, or take damage for each inch that you fall when you fall. Your list of actions for when you activate a model is pretty standard. You can make a ranged attack, a melee attack. You can use a piece of equipment or a feat. You can use a manuscript. You can drag it down a model, or you can make a second move as an action. Now, in these games, your move must precede your action. If you jump straight to your action, then you forfeit your move. Important to note, because it does matter. Like, you can't take a swing and then move. It's move and then do a thing. And if you want to do a thing with your second thing, you can move some more, but you can't swing then move. That's not allowed. I made that mistake several times in some of the earlier battle reports for Forbidden Psalm. That's why I'm trying to help you be better than I was. Melee combat is pretty straightforward. You roll a DR12 test, adding any modifiers or subtracting any modifiers as the case may potentially be. If you get it, then you hit. However, they get a chance to swing back at you, but at a -3 modifier to their roll. If you fumble, you drop your weapon, and if the target of the attack survived and has not activated, it is still able to activate this round. Ranged attacks are much the same. DR12, roll your damage if you hit and mark an ammo off. It took me a while to get used to the ammo mechanics in the game. They're not bad and they're not difficult. They're just an extra layer of bookkeeping that I was not really used to until I started playing Kill Sample Process, because I did not use any ranged models in Forbidden Psalm because I felt like I was just broke as all get out the whole time, and I just couldn't get it together on that one. You can throw any weapon up to 6 inches, but it has a -3 penalty and is placed on the ground next to your target, regardless of if you hit or miss. Ranged weapons do count as one-handed improvised weapons, makeshift weapons they're called in this game. When it comes to damage, you roll whatever damage dice is associated to your weapon. The game does use a full set of polyhedral dice, which is something that I'm always happy to see in the game. I like buying those sets of dice for different games and just having them. It makes me happy. I'm actually looking to go buy some dice for this game as we speak. I may ride out there later this afternoon after the Arsenal game, as a matter of fact. Armor value is reduced. Now, I could be wrong here, and this could just be rule soup in my brain. I will go back and check the other books later. In this one, it says that armor always reduces damage unless otherwise stated. I feel like in other versions there was a caveat that said to a minimum of 1. But actually, now that I think about it, I think that might be from Chrome Hammer. I think I might have had that wrong. I'll correct it in the future. And I know it now moving forward with this game for sure. Leaving combat you can do, but you have to make an agility, or the opponent makes a DR12 check to try to make an attack of opportunity against you, basically. You can drag a model at half movement speed, and you require at least +1 strength to drag them. Morale. Morale is something that it doesn't matter what game it is, it always gives me a hard time in my brain. It's necessary, and I like that it's a part of the game. I'm not complaining that it's there at all. I'm just saying that it doesn't matter what the system is. My brain always has a hard time understanding morale checks. So there are 2 situations in this game where you could be forced to take a morale test. The first is if you are critically hit. The second is if you strike a downed enemy, because the weight of what you are doing by attacking and killing a disabled opponent is a lot for your psyche to work through at one time in the moment. So that forces you to potentially just freak out and run away. If you fail the test, it's DR12. DR12. Presence test. Yes, DR12. If you fail it, you run immediately your max movement towards the closest board edge. On their next activation, if they don't make it off the board, they take the test again. If they pass, they can continue and activate as normal. If they fail, they continue to run. You retake it every round until you're off the battle. If you fail a test and you are engaged with an enemy, that does not trigger an enemy attack. You run away. When it comes to taking damage, when your HP is reduced to 0 or less, you are down. You lay the model face up. If they take any more damage, you flip them over and they are just dead on the spot. You do have one of your special cards that will let you automatically remove a downed model from play and pass or whatever. So that's good. At the end of the game, you must pass a death save. It's DR6 toughness test. If you fail, you're dead. If you pass, then you get an injury roll, and if you crit, you still get a roll on the injury table, but you also get a new feat, which is pretty sweet. You kind of had a near-death experience and gained some kind of knowledge of the universe or your surroundings that will then proceed to help you. Next, we come into the page for setting up a scenario, which has this really cool kind of photograph of this old castle, which is just pretty awesome. I like it. It's a cool looking building. And there is a section here that I personally ignore when I play the game because I tend to straddle the line between having a really good looking table, or what I think is a really good looking table, and having a table that looks really cool but is unplayable. I usually put a lot of terrain on the table because that's just how I like my boards, especially for skirmish games. I like there to be lots of stuff. But there are procedures that are laid out and written for placing terrain. And that's that each player places a single piece, and then you roll a d6 and you add the number of currently placed terrain pieces. If the result is 9 or more, you stop adding terrain. For example, if you place 6 pieces and then roll a 3 on the die, you would stop placing terrain. So there are rules for placing terrain. I tend to ignore them because, again, I'm a firm believer in my table, my game, my fun, and I like lots of terrain. So that's what I do. We then move on to one of everybody's favorite parts of any game, loot. When you are within an inch of a loot marker, you can make a presence test at DR12. Sorry, I'm telling you wrong. DR10, it's not the standard. It's a little bit easier. So at a DR10, to see what's in the loot is. On a 1, you fumble and you take 1 point of damage. That ignores armor. If you're successful, you roll on this chart. And there's a really cool piece of art here that's very, very simple. And it's this kind of diagram of different styles of steak. And I don't know why. It's just, I think that's a really neat picture. And you have your list of things that range from D4 shillings to a random artifact. It's a D20 roll. If the character has room in their inventory, they pick it up for no action, for no cost. If they do not have room in their inventory, it just sits on the ground beside them. I strongly suggest having at least 2 of your characters that have a lot of strength when you play these games. Because if not, again, I'm trying to help you be better than me, managing your inventory becomes very, very, very difficult because the items, the gear that they have also counts for carry slots. So you can get in a situation where, or at least that's the way I've understood it to be. If I'm wrong, please correct me because that would be very, very helpful if I was wrong here. But once you get your weapons, you got 2 weapons and some armor, that's all you can carry. So you end up with people that just can't really help loot or carry anything. We then come into weather and conditions, which I think there might be a few more of these than there are in the other books. But this is a D12 roll, and it gets things from heavy rains to vampire bats that are just clogging. And then we have an explanation of, or we have weather, and then we have conditions, which could be muddy, darkness, and partial darkness. Muddy is a -1 to movement penalty, -1 inch to movement. Darkness is if you don't have a lantern or other source of light and you're not within 6 inches of another model with a source of light, you have -6 to all rolls, and then partial darkness is a -3 to all rolls. We then come to the smog mutations, which are something that you only need when you are directed to roll them. But it's a D12 chart with things that can happen to your character. If you ever were to roll the same one twice, then the mutation just goes away. But it can be things like plague, where you're covered in black boils and you suffer -1 to all strength and agility tests, to an extra Lemme, where you get +1 equipment slot. So there's some variety there. The cards that I was mentioning earlier are called the Bonds of Fate. And this is neat. This reminds me very, very much of the World of Darkness, specifically Werewolf the Apocalypse, mainly just because it has the actual names of the phases of the moon. So full moon is max damage. Waning is reroll any dice, yours or someone else's. New is remove a downed model and auto pass its death save. Waxing is cancel a critical or fumble. First is reroll on the loot table. And Gibbous is automatically pass a test. We then come into the monsters of the night. The baddies. So monsters make all their attacks, checks, everything at DR12, and they do not stack any modifiers, good or bad, unless something specifically states that. And this applies to that crackback in combat. They're still swinging at their DR12. That was a mistake that I was making in the beginning because I misunderstood that, / probably missed that line when I was reading through. They do not prioritize downed models, and if they are in combat but only have a ranged attack, they will make unarmed attacks dealing D4 damage unless otherwise stated. Their morale, when they have to do it, is 2d6, and if it's greater than the morale, they flee, just like you would, leaving 2d6. If they have a dash for their morale, then they just ignore morale rules. So if you need to spawn a random monster, you'll place them as instructed by the scenario. If a monster rolls a 1, they will drop their weapon. If it's a weapon that's attached to them, like claws or fangs or something, obviously they're not going to drop that. And if they have no weapon, they'll take its action to pick up any lost weapons. Any items carried by monsters can be picked up as an action within 1 inch. Monsters treat other monsters not of the same type as them as hostile and will fight them. For example, a feral vampire will not attack a master vampire, but both would fight a savage werewolf. And then we have keywords that are used to clarify what a creature is and what feats and items and weapons it has. For example, silvered weapons ignore the armor of vampires and werewolves, and any monster with the keyword vampire or werewolf counts for that item's feature. We then come to the AI flowchart. It's going to be very similar. Now, I do like that he's moved to doing this as a flowchart as opposed to doing it as a list of things. It's a very, very easy to follow chart. It's very easy to internalize it to the point where you no longer need to reference this page. After, I would say, probably 2 or 3 games, you'll have it down pat. It's not a difficult AI at all. Then we come into the actual mob descriptions, and we have some absolute banger art right here. I love this style. Just the stark contrast, black and white with your that bright red color, pop of color in it. Just chef kiss. It's absolutely gorgeous. And then we got all our different kinds of vampires, all of our different kinds of werewolves. You've got a Frankenstein-y type thing, or Frankenstein's monster type thing, the creator and the creation. I've got models for those. I'm excited for that. Ghouls, Cephaldeur. I'm not sure how to say that, but it looks kind of like a selkie. Really, really cool piece of art. Love that with the emphasis, using that red to pull the emphasis to the eyes. Great stuff. We have a random spawn table for pulling the monsters to you, or when you have to randomly spawn them, not for pulling them to you. Then we move Ghost, and then we've got Infections. So this is really, really, really cool, and I kind of hope I get an infection. So I don't know how many of you that are watching this might have played Skyrim. I assume probably most of you. But remember the DLC that let you choose whether to be a vampire or a werewolf? And remember how we played it multiple times so that we could see what both sides was like? Well, we got that here. You can become a vampire. You can become a werewolf. You can become a ghoul. Are there any more? Vampire, werewolf, ghoul? No. So, this is awesome. So, it's an infection. It's when you become infected, check which infection they have. And I assume it'll come from a monster that you are fighting that will tell you to take this test. It has a benefit, a drawback, and a cure. So, for vampirism, for example, You get +1 agility, +1 strength. You are immune to all other infections, and you auto-pass death saves. Your drawback, however, is that if you critically hit a model, you have to take a presence test. And if you fail, you are overcome with bloodlust and become a feral vampire for the rest of that scenario. Non-player controlled. At the end of the scenario, you get to make the test again. If you pass, you get control of yourself and you carry on. If you fail, then you are lost to the infection forever and you're just off the roster sheet. There is a cure. So for the vampirism, you must kill your sire, but it must be the character that is infected to deal the killing blow with a stake through the heart. If someone else happens to kill it, hope is not lost. You still have a chance anytime you're spawning infected people. There's a chance that one of those infected could be your sire. And then it's similar to things for lycanthropy, which would be your werewolfism, and your ghoul stain, which turns you into a ghoul. So, yeah, that's pretty freaking cool. I'm excited. I really, really kind of hope that Dean gets infected with vampirism. Oh, it made me so happy. We then come into our scenarios, of which there are probably 9 or 10. That's usually about how many we get. And then maybe some special ones on the side. So we got 12 core scenarios, and then we've got a repeatable scenario, one where you kind of randomize the things that you're doing. We actually have two of the repeatables. We have We Are Going on a Hunt, which is a repeatable, just kind of hunting mission scenario, and we've got The Cure. So I like those features. I love randomly generated scenarios. The scenario pages are laid out really, really easy to follow. You have your kind of little fluff introduction. You have your goal. You have your reward, your setup and loots, your deployment, your weather conditions, your threats. And then there are slight modifications that are made for whether or not you are playing a head-to-head game, a solo game, or a co-op game. And then it tells you when the scenario ends. So, for example, on the first one, the game ends after the 6th round, or if all creations have left the table. After the scenarios, we come to our campaign post-game. So this is where we differ a little bit. This is where we stray a little bit from the tradition of the other games and the way they were handled. And it's because of that new kind of guild system that I mentioned earlier that I think is super, super, super rad. Step 1 of post-game is that you earn, as long as you have at least one living member, you earn whatever your guild's reward is. So your reward is determined by your selection of guild. Then we roll our death saves, our injury saves. We buy and sell things. And then we gain our XP. We get XP per monster killed, per loot collected, per scenarios that we survive, per models that we down, which would be like other player models, per death saves passed, and per crew members who died. Then we can spend our XP to raise an ability, to remove an injury, to re-roll a flaw, to gain a new feat, to bring a member back from the dead with a new flaw, or to remove a smog mutation. We then roll a D66 for a random event on page 114, which we haven't gotten to yet. We hire new crew members. We spend 50 shillings to purchase. We can spend 50 shillings to purchase an HQ upgrade. We can shuffle around equipment. We can visit the apothecary. And at the end of the campaign, we can calculate our score by +5 for each model that made it all the way through the campaign alive, +1 for each infected crew, +1 for each artifact, and +1 for each HQ upgrade purchased. We then have our artifacts, 12 of them. Not going to read through all of them. We get but with things like a diving suit, a necklace of teeth, an herbalist's primer, or Dr. J's. You get it? Dr. J. Serum. Our injuries, which could be a lost limb, a bloody flux. You could be concussed, dropsy. We have our apothecary, which is where we can buy remedies and pay to auto-pass death saves. If you've got some extra cash, you can hire a mercenary. For 25 shillings, you can hire a mercenary to join you in a scenario. The mercenary replaces one of your crew members for that scenario. And if they're dead, they can never be rehired during a campaign. Stats and equipment cannot be swapped or replaced. They never drop their equipment by choice and can only be hired by one crew per scenario. And they are Nemo, Varney, Jack, and Dr. and Mr. Again, that's Dr. J right there. And Jack, like Jack the Ripper, Captain Nemo. Varney, I'm not sure who that is. And it's okay. You can make fun of me for not knowing who that is if need. But the only Varney that I can think of is Jim Varney, and I don't think he's referring to Ernest. But if he is referring to Ernest, then I need to go dig for some models. We then have our random events, which are after each scenario where we roll our D66. And it can be like grave robbery, finders keepers, debt collectors. Random crew member suffers -1 agility because he got kneecapped by the collector. Greg the garlic farmer, everybody gains free garlic. And there's all kinds of stuff. Some of them good, some of them bad, some of them mediocre. And that's okay. So then we have this, which I think this may tie to a specific scenario or something. I'm not exactly sure what this is. I think this is maybe for the repeatable hunt scenario. Maybe. And then we have our rosters. Now, as of right now, I cannot find a PDF of the roster. I asked in the Facebook group if anybody had a link to it, and Will responded to me saying that he had actually not yet done the PDF, but that he was working on it. And then we come to a quick reference, which his quick references are phenomenal. They are tight. They could easily fit and be printed onto a single page, one side, and they tell you everything that you need to know. They are phenomenal quick references. And that brings us, my friends, to the end of Dread Knights. So I'm going to give you some final thoughts and then tell you to have a great day. So this book is $40. It is from, oh God, let me look it up because I don't want to say their name wrong. Space Penguin Inc. is the current publisher that Will is working with, at least for this book. $40. I did not pay for this. They were kind enough to reach out and send me a copy of this to talk about and to play. So thank you so much. If you see this, Will or anybody from Space Penguin, thank you for considering me, giving me the opportunity to check this really, really cool game out. The PDF is also available in a PDF form, I assume, on drive-through. I haven't checked. I'm making an assumption here. The PDFs for his games normally range between $10 and $15, depending on sale, day of the week, things like that. Very, very reasonable. They do take a little bit of a toll on your printer because of all the colored, full color pages. But if you print them in black and white, it's not that bad. I've printed out all the others in black and white myself, and it hasn't been too taxing on the machine. It is in that small kind of A4 size format, which is my absolute favorite. I don't really travel or leave my house to game much anymore. I do most of my gaming here at home. However, rule books that are this size are perfect for people who are going to an LGS or anywhere else like that to play the game. The game is miniature agnostic, so there is no model line for it. You can use whatever you want. Always a plus for me, because at this point in my hobby, when I go look for games, I usually one of the things when I'm just looking for something new, I will just cruise around and look for games that will fit the collection that I already have. Like the set, you look for something that fits the setting that I have terrain for, or something that I can reskin, like I'm going to do with this. And then from there, like, okay, do I have models that'll work for this game? Because that cuts the time. That cuts the time of finding the game, becoming interested with the world, and putting that world onto the table. And that's a huge, huge, huge plus for me, especially with making content, but also as just a gamer who gets kind of impatient sometimes with wanting to get a game on the table. All of that to get to this. Will's games are an enormous amount of fun. The rule sets are very simple. They play very, very quickly. It's very easy to get in 2 or 3 games in a session of an hour and a half, 2 hours, with a chunk of that being the time of setting up and breaking down the table. So in my opinion, this is an absolute buy, purchase, pick up, get the real book, get the PDF, get whatever works for you. I do not think that they have the physical cards for this game out yet as far as the monster stat cards. I'm hoping that is something that is coming. Maybe that will come also with some cards for kill sample process. But if it doesn't, that's fine. It's not that difficult to look up the stat blocks. And then I'm going to say thank you so much for tuning in, hanging out with me while we talked about Dread Knights today. And I hope you have an absolutely amazing rest of your day.
And as always, I'd like to say a big, huge, from the bottom of my heart, thank you to our patrons who support us and pledge to us over on Patreon. You guys are the absolute best. If you enjoyed the content you saw here today and that's something that you would like to consider doing to help out the channel, go over there, check out the link in the description, check out the Patreon. There's a lot of cool stuff over there, including access to our Discord server, talk to me, hang out with me, talk about our work, what we got going on in the hobby, some shout outs, all kinds of cool stuff. Check it out if that's something that you think you would be into. And regardless of whether or not you do that, I want you to know that I am incredibly grateful that you decided to stop by and spend part of your day with me today, rolling dice and pushing toy soldiers around. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. And as always, may the dice be ever in your favor.